Hello, this is Al Judge. Welcome to another lesson from my book, From Photos to Art with Photoshop. In this lesson, we'll be talking about the many ways to open files in Photoshop. Like everything else in Photoshop, there are numerous ways to do anything, and files are no exception. So I'm going to start up here with the File menu, and we're going to go to Open, which is sort of a normal navigation kind of a thing that should look pretty familiar to most people. To open files in most programs. And I'm just going to select this first image and open it. Okay, now the next thing on the menu is Browse and Bridge. Bridge is a program that is part of Photoshop, and it's basically a file organizer, but it has some other nice features to it. And one is that you can size your previews with the slider down here at the bottom. So I can get some pretty large previews and really be able to look at the images before I open them to make sure it's the exact one that I want. And again, I'm going to slide it back to how I would normally use it. I usually have about 2 across, and that's enough for me. Now the other thing is, whichever image is chosen, you'll see that in the preview window, but you'll also see all the metadata for that image. So I can tell its size, the resolution, I can tell all my camera data. So there's plenty of data there, and you can also add keywords if you choose to help you find that file again later. Over here is your primary navigation control, and down here you have some filters and collections, which I don't happen to have any right now, but ways to find images by different factors. So it can be a very nice organizing tool, but I use it mostly for its preview value. And the one thing that's really valuable is if these were raw photos, I could still see the previews. That's not true in most programs. So I don't care what format my image is in, I will see a preview in Bridge, and that's very helpful. So I'm going to choose a few more images using Bridge. I've chosen one, and I'm going to hold down the Shift key and select a few more. And now I have 3 images chosen, and you'll see all 3 are up here in the preview window. And if I double click on any one of them, they will open up in Photoshop. Okay, now another way to open files is to open in Mini Bridge. And Mini Bridge is has basically the same function as Bridge, but it shows up like a film strip at the bottom of your computer screen. So again, I can open files the same way I did with Bridge. I can come in here and select one. And hold down the Shift key, select the whole group, double click on any one, and they'll all open up. Now in Bridge you also have a search function here. You can search for an image based on keywords or the file name. Now if you click on this arrow, you can close the Bridge, Mini Bridge, and it'll always be available anytime from this file menu. Okay, now this is something a little different from what's in the book. As I wrote the book, I was looking at trying to maintain things that had been part of Photoshop for a long time. This menu selection until recently has just said open as, and it was another way to open files as if they were raw files, so you could use Adobe Camera Raw to open those images. That has some real advantages, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But now I just updated my software yesterday, and it turns out it has changed that menu selection. And this is actually a good thing because it makes it much easier to open files as raw files, as if they were raw files. So if you don't have the latest version of Photoshop, you're just going to see open as. And I've avoided that topic because it's a little less obvious than other ways of opening files. When it was open as, you would have to navigate to the file, click on it, and then hit open as, and then select raw from a drop-down menu. So there were several steps to get to it. But now you can just open any file as if it were a raw file. So I'm gonna click on this. If I go to one of these images, I open it. You can see up here it says it's a smart object. And now I can go to the filter menu and say Camera Raw Filter. Now when I do that, this is going to open up the Camera Raw program. If you're not familiar with Photoshop Camera Raw, or Adobe Camera Raw actually is what it's called, and you are a Lightroom user, this is very similar to the Develop module in Lightroom. You have a number of sliders that you can use to affect your image, and you have all kinds of other options up here. Now, this is already a fairly decent image, so some of these things may not be so obvious, but I'm going to work with some of these sliders anyway so you can see exactly what happens in Camera Raw. We have several different menus in Camera Raw that do different things. One very nice tool here is White Balance tool. If you don't happen to have your white balance set perfectly, you can use this eyedropper to refine that. If I know that I have something in my image that's either white, black, or neutral gray, all I have to do is click on that object and it will readjust the white balance. Now these tones here are pretty close to white, so I'm going to just click on them to see what happens here. And you'll see virtually nothing. So I'm going to play around with the temperature, which will affect white balance. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to give it a blue cast to make it colder. And now if I come back and click on that white tone, it restored it to the previous color. As I was doing this, you may have noticed there's some detail in here that's not real obvious. With Camera Raw, I can come in here and I can work on those shadows. I can brighten them up. So I'm going to brighten up the shadows. And you'll see that detail is really popping out now. I can also come in here and add clarity to the image. Add some vibrance, saturation. Now I am changing the colors, and this is not how I would really want my image, but you can see some of the things that you can do with Camera Raw. And here again, I'm gonna play with these highlights and bring them down a bit. And I'm going to increase contrast. I can change my exposure. So with sliders, I can make dramatic differences in my image very easily. I'm going to change this tint here. It also has some other features, things that are in Photoshop, the larger program, like curves. I can do a curves adjustment right here by moving sliders. And you'll see this curve change. So I can do that. Adobe Camera Raw is a large topic in itself, so we're not going to go through a whole lot of other things here. I just wanted to show you some of the nice things you can do with it. Something you may want to work with yourself. Away from Camera Raw for the moment, I just wanted to make you aware of the fact that it exists, that you can open any image in it now, not just the Camera Raw. This is probably a topic for another book. It's much more complex than I want to cover in this book at this time. Okay, I'm just going to close this out now, commit the changes, and when I do, you'll see this image change. And it's quite a bit of difference from the original image. Now, the nice thing is I can turn this off. So there's my original image. These are the changes I made in Adobe Camera Raw. And I will always have my original image available here. Okay, so we have opened files in 4 different ways. Now we also have a thing here, Open Recent. Any files that I've opened recently, it has the location of those files, and I can open them up again very easily. As you can see here, I can clear this list if it's things that I don't want to keep track of. I also can go up to Photoshop Preferences, come down to File Handling, and down here on this File Handling option, Recent file, this contains 20 files. I can make this 30th of them. So I don't keep track of the last 30 files I've used. Or I can make it 10 or 15, anything I want to make it. And when I click OK, we'll see that we have a much longer list. Okay, now one thing that we didn't address up here is the new file. Okay, now let's create a new file. And when we do, the new file window opens and it gives us a number of choices here. This it has some built-in presets. This particular one called Book Cover is a preset that I created for my book covers. But we'll look at this drop-down menu. These here are defaults that Photoshop has built in, and I'm going to choose US paper, and that shows me it's a letter size, it's 8.5 by 11, and the resolution is 300 pixels per inch. Well, let's just change a couple things to show how it's done. I'm going to change that resolution to 360. I'm going to change the bits to 16, and I'm going to change the color to Other. Choose a gray. Say OK. So we see the gray is showing here now. 8.5 by 11, 360 pixels per inch, 16-bit. And I'm going to say Save Preset. And I'm going to call this Gray Letter. And I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to cancel. Now if I come back up here to open a new file, I can see my book cover, but now I now have gray letter is also a preset. So if I click on that and I give this new file a name, new gray file, click OK, you can see it opens up 8.5 by 11 sheet of gray paper, and the name of the file appears up here. So that can be the starting point for any number of things that I might do with it. I'm going to close that out and just show you I could have also, again, picked my book cover, in which case it's a white sheet and it's a little larger than 8.5 by 11. So we've covered creating a new file, opening files in 4 different ways, and then opening recent files and how to change the number of files that are saved in the recent file list. Okay, now we've opened. We can also show we can close all to close all these files. And I can say apply to all, don't save. So none of the changes we made. Actually, we're going to go back and we're going to browse in the bridge. We're going to open all these files again. In addition to opening files, we can arrange the files in our display area. In order to arrange these files differently, we go up here to the window, arrange, and we have a whole variety of different ways to look at these. I'm going to start here with 6 up. So I'm seeing 6 images at the same time. I can inspect and look at them. And there are times when you will want to do this. But more commonly, there are a couple arrangements. Well, let's just toggle all vertically. We can see all the files I have open are now in a vertical arrangement. We can toggle all horizontally. Similar kind of thing. Can't really see a whole lot. If I had fewer files, this might make more sense. But more commonly, 2 up horizontal, where you could be comparing 2 different images in a horizontal position. You can do window arrange 2 up vertically. This 2 up vertical arrangement is very useful for several reasons. One is you can place your original image on one side and your modified image on the other, and you can see as you're working on your modified image the changes and compare them. The other thing is there's some functions that you really need to have 2 images up at once in order to do correctly. And one of those situations would be, imagine that this image on the left is a group image, family portrait kind of a thing. And you've taken 6 or 7 different shots, and you have one that looks really good except for one person looking away or yawning. But you happen to have another image over here where that person really looks good. So if you have them both up on the screen, you can select that person from this image and drag it over and put it here. But you really need to have both of them open at the time to do a good job. So this is one that you might want to use from time to time. The most common arrangement is consolidate all the tabs, and that's how we've had it set up here. You can see I can just go down these tabs and choose whichever image I want. And because there are more images than can fit on the tabs, we have these double arrows indicate a drop-down list where I can select any individual image that I want. Okay, so I can just move around very quickly and easily that way. But again, I can grab. So that pretty well covers arranging files. As you can see, you have a lot of variety here in how you arrange files, and there will be times when any one of these may be particularly valuable to you. So just look here for a moment. This 3 up stacked is a little different than the 3 up. And you'll see you have 2 small images and 1 large, and there are times when that will help. But again, in most cases, you'll just want to use consolidate all the tabs. This way you have the largest display area for any given image, and you're only working on 1 image at a time. Okay, I think we pretty well covered opening files and arranging files. So that's the end of this lesson. I'll see you in the next lesson.